The college football experience, Ole Miss Rebels 2024 season preview episode on the Sports Gambling Podcast Network is brought to you by Underdog Fantasy. You can win up to 325 times the amount of money you enter with their brand new Pick 8. Yes, sign up with the promo code TCESGPN to claim your special pick plus first time deposit offer up to $250 in bonus cash. And yes, they do have college football. UnderdogFantasy.com, promo code TCESGPN. We're also brought to you by Rhythm. Get the best data-driven props and picks from Rhythm. Claim your free 7-day trial period today. SportsGamblingPodcast.com/rhythm. That's RITHMM. Once again, that's SportsGamblingPodcast.com/rhythm. And remember, as always, folks, too, let it ride.
Hey, folks, this is Bud Foster. You're listening to SGPN. Let's let it ride.
Football experience, Ole Miss Rebels 2024 season preview episode. And wow, okay, we have a lot to talk about here. Hopefully you're watching the show, youtube.com/the college experience. We're breaking down all 134 college football teams with a solo podcast for every single team in the land, just like we do each and every year. But this year it's 134 because Kennesaw State joins the FBS. I'm sure you'll see them on a lot of SEC schedules moving forward. And look, SEC football, 16-team conference. I think it's the most interesting college football season that I can recall from the preseason aspect of this, with the looming 12-team playoff, the fact that your national champion coach Jim Harbaugh leaves to go to the NFL because he was going to be suspended for the whole season probably. And also Nick Saban retires. And then you have all this conference realignment.
The other championship coach leaving his team.
Yeah. And you just got, it's a lot going on, but Ole Miss, going all in. I love it. I respect it. And we're going to talk all about it, folks. If you're wondering who the hell you're listening to, my name is Colby Swinging Database Dad, AKA Pick Dundee. That's not a pick. This is a pick.
He was raised in the land down under, where a man thinks on his feet, speaks with his fists, and lives by his wits.
When Dundee happened, he was a superstar.
I'm probably drinking too much and celebrating too much and not sleeping. Would have killed a normal man, but no, that's gone. The medical advice I got from that was like being hit by lightning. Pretend it never happened and get on with your life.
Hotty, toddy, let's go. Take me down to the Grove. Give me a cocktail. Let's have some fun.
Mint julep.
Oh, a mint julep and a what did Brian Kelly say? Like, thank you for me and my family. Give me a nice iced tea. All right. Give me a nice sweet tea. I am joined by my co-host. Give it up for former JMU Duke defensive back, the burrito eating, sideline kiss stealing, wheeling and dealing, Patty C in the place to be.
Hi-oh! Up!
Let's get it going, man. I can't wait for this season. I'm already there, Big baller. Shout out to the chat. Like I said, youtube.com/the college experience. You guys got to bring on Phil Steele again. You know it. We put Phil on every year. Hell of a good guy. We are also joined by third man in the booth, the DFS god himself. Give it up for the rooftop IPA drinking, homebrew making, tobacco road living, the free lock giving, former Herndon Basketball League MVP. Give it up for NC Nick in the place to be.
There we go. What's going on, guys? I feel like as the the current DFS guy, You've rostered quite a bit of Ole Miss players in your time recently, haven't you?
Well, he should. Yeah.
Yeah, especially Quinshon Judkins, who's no longer there.
I feel like
a
Matt
big fan
Corral.
of his.
You loaded up with Matt Corral when they had Jeff Levy and things rolling.
They had a lot of pass catchers putting up big stats too. So the offense has been moving. So yeah, I think so.
Fair to say. And yeah, I guess we should start there. Like, okay, so obviously, head coach Lane Kiffin, a lot of people thought he was going to go to Auburn a couple years ago. He did not. And now, a lot of people think Ole Miss could play for the SEC championship this year. He's in, I believe, year 5, is it?
Year 5.
So what do you think of the tenure and what he's doing there in Oxford, Mississippi? Clearly it was, I guess you could argue that Hugh Freeze had it rolling similarly, but I think he's done quite a great job there. Nick?
Well, first off,
we got some technical difficulties already.
Technical Freeze. Speaking of which,
So we
go ahead, Nick. You just unfroze.
I'm not sure where I left off. But
we didn't hear anything.
Nothing. Oh, perfect.
Yeah.
We're off to a fantastic start. Now, this is the longest he's been anywhere. Just 3 years at FAU, 4 at USC, and then Tennessee, and then his time in the NFL. I'd say so far so good. Ole Miss is one of the teams who previously could never get over the hump. Call them the Penn State of the SEC. Now with the expanded playoff, they have a fantastic opportunity to make the 12 teams, and then from there, who knows? I mean, they could still lose in the first round and that not mean anything. But now they have a chance, and I think there's probably 6 teams in the SEC with realistic college football playoff aspirations, and Ole Miss is one of them, definitely.
There's rumors that he could be the next head coach at Florida too.
I know you're starting those rumors.
I'm just saying, like, if you pay attention, I've heard it on the internets, but I'm just letting you know there's rumors out there. But
that makes a lot of sense.
I hear there's rumors on the internets.
Patty C, what do you make of Kiffin 5 years into his tenure in Oxford?
Well, to say that Ole Miss has been the Penn State of the SEC is pretty generous to Ole Miss. They have 4 10-win seasons since 1971. Granted, 3 of them have come recently. So, lately, maybe they've been.
I think a better comparison could be the Michigan State of the Big Ten.
In the last 3 or 4 years, they've been Penn State. Look at last year. Last year, they go 10-2 in the regular season with their only losses.
Yeah, they whooped Penn State's ass. So.
Their only losses last year were at Alabama and at Georgia. That is exactly Penn State not being able to beat Michigan and Ohio State.
Yeah, no, that's a good comparison. Okay,
you know what though? Kiffin's had his troubles against these Big 12 teams. I think Baylor and Texas Tech caught him, and now you get a couple Big 12 teams entering the SEC. Just saying.
One more thing. Go back to 2021, Kiffin's second season. Again, 10-2 regular season. Their only 2 losses at Bama, at Auburn. They've been very close to getting over the top. They just haven't been able to. Those 2 years specifically.
They've gotten destroyed in those games frequently. So I don't know how they've from a record standpoint getting close, and that would get them in the playoff. Those 10-win seasons, I believe.
Yeah. I think if you're a 10-2 SEC team, you're in the playoffs this year.
Yeah, certainly, definitely. So yeah, that's going to be their challenge. Maybe, I mean, they've never been in the SEC championship games starting since 1992. So
yeah, even Mississippi State and Arkansas have been in that game, but not
pretty crazy.
So they're the NC State of the SEC.
That's a great comparison.
Yeah, that actually is probably a good comparison.
So yeah, I mean, look, 5 years into his tenure, I don't know what the fuck I was going to say. I was going to say something else, but let's just jump into it because I do got. Let's talk a little bit about old Lane Train here. This is record 5 years into it, and I think the most impressive thing is the record 3-0 against Texas A&M. I mean, and him and Jimbo had that feud, so he's got to be loving life there. Now, no 75-yard field goals have been kicked yet at Ole Miss. I'm a little disappointed, knowing that Lane Kiffin's rolled out Sebastian Janikowski for a 75-yard field goal with the Raiders. He's 0-5 against Alabama and Georgia. And how about this? He's 2-2 against LSU. Hey, I think Rebel fans will tell you that's That's improvement. 3-0 against A&M. 3-1 in the Egg Bowl. He was 2-1 against Leach, and then he got the interim last year. 2-2 against Auburn, 2-2 against Arkansas, 4-0 against Vandy. Remember, they played Vandy every year. 0-1 against Florida, though. 2-0 against Kentucky, 1-0 against South Carolina, 1-0 against Tennessee. So he is beating the teams. Not only is he beating the teams they should beat, like he's winning those 50-50 matchups. You know what I mean? Like Tennessee and Ole Miss to me are on a similar level.
Yeah.
And
Auburn.
Well, just the fact you're 3-0 against A&M is huge. Now that might change moving forward with Elko there, but it's pretty. I mean, what's the worst stat there? Just
0-4 against Bama.
I think the 0-4 versus Bama, 0-1 versus Georgia epitomizes Kiffin's stay at Ole Miss. Not quite being very good, but not quite being able to be the top of the top in the SEC.
And those are forgivable because those are monster programs that are, rolling at full strength right now. And he's coming in on a couple years' notice and trying to punch this thing up to their level. That's not easy to do.
For sure. And I mean, with the SEC West no longer a thing, there's no Alabama on the schedule this year.
Yeah, that's true. No team probably benefits more than Ole Miss.
Of course, Alabama might not be Alabama of a few years ago, but
funny
timing there. But I think they're glad not to see the Tide on the schedule.
Yeah,
true. But those Big 12 schools that they've struggled against, Baylor and Texas Tech, they're not in the SEC, but Texas and Oklahoma are. Maybe that means something. He's 34-15 in 5 years, though. I think he's doing quite a good job. Look. The team lost some guys, only 3 guys to the NFL draft. Were you surprised at that number and thinking there were going to be more players drafted, traditionally?
Yeah. I mean, Ole Miss generally, I feel like is in like the 4 to 5 range.
And here's what's interesting is to win as many games as you won last year. And I believe 2 of those 3 draft picks were in the 7th round. So,
and all on defense.
Yeah, which was their, they were pretty. That was their weakness last year.
Yeah.
Well, and that kind of makes sense because as you look at returning production on offense, 83%, 9th best in the country. So most of the players weren't ready to graduate, and you could argue maybe they weren't quite good enough to leave early.
Yeah. So they lose Spencer Sanders, quarterback depth a little bit, but wide receiver Dayton Wade, who was a top 10 wide receiver in the SEC a year ago. The defensive side of the ball, they lose to the NFL draft. These 3 is who we're referring to: cornerback DeAndre Prince, defensive end Cedric Johnson, safety Dejan Anthony. They lost a couple other, solid players on the team from a year ago. I know Patty C wants to bring up Isaac Ukwu, who was a transfer from JMU.
Hello.
Is this just a graduation?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. We will get to the transfer portal. But let's talk a little bit about that offense. The Rebels were 16th in the nation, 35.1 points per game. That's 3rd best in the SEC a year ago. They were 13th in the nation in yards, 461.9 yards per game, 3rd best in the SEC a year ago. 19th in passing offense, 285.6 yards per game, 3rd best in the SEC. And 39th in rushing, 176.3 yards, 5th best in the SEC. Man, you look at those numbers, you're like, maybe he's right with this Penn State analogy, because Penn State's always right there, I feel like. But I mean, do any of those stand out to you? I guess, being 3rd best in general with points per game in the SEC it's good. That's good company to be with, because I think Alabama and Georgia are the only 2 teams ahead of you.
That's very impressive. And then, going back to what I just said about the returning production, there's no reason why they can't, duplicate that, if not improve upon it.
Yeah.
The only question is they're starting to slip a little offensively. 2 years ago, they were 8. 3 years ago, they were number 6, and that was before Lebby was there. I feel like Lebby, they were in that top 5 pretty much both, or however many years he was there. So they're slipping down to 13. I mean, that's still acceptable overall, but maybe not quite as explosive as they've been. But still, I think
they don't. I would say Jaxson Dart's not as much as a running quarterback as some of the other guys they've had. Jeff Lebby runs that bullshit offense where you slide up, you run up and slide. But
maybe the fact that they do have a running back and a power game. I guess Judkins left, but assuming that's still the how their offense is going to operate, they're not such a gimmick of an offense, and that bodes well for big games.
Well, one thing to note though is Jeff Lebby is now at Mississippi State, so the Egg Bowl, which for some stupid reason is not going to be played on Thanksgiving, they're finally moving it, which sucks. But it's interesting. Lebby against Kiffin, his old boss, so it should be interesting.
Because I understand how the bastard thinks. I taught him. Now I own one.
That's what Lane Kiffin's saying. Look, the offense does return 7 starters from a year ago. Jaxson Dart, who had beat out Spencer Sanders, and what do you guys make of Jaxson Dart? He's a guy that puts up some big numbers, 23 touchdowns, 5 interceptions a year ago. But I will say this, and much like Brady Cook at Missouri, when I said this, I kind of think if Ole Miss is going to really like hit a level they've never been to, he's got to take his game one step further, in my opinion. What do you make of Jaxson Dart, NC Nick?
That's funny because I was about to bring up Brady Cook too. There's some definite similarities because if you look at 2022 to 2023, Jaxson Dart's completion percentage went up, his yards went up, his touchdowns went up, his interceptions went down. Exactly the same as Cook. So he's improving, but he's not that elite quarterback. He's not one of the top 3 or 4 in the SEC yet. If he can make that jump, then there's no stopping this offense this year because it sure seems like a lot of the other pieces are in place.
Yeah, the wideouts: Trey Harris, Jordan Watkins back, tight end Caden Prescorn, all transferred. The Portal King. That's what Lane Kiffin, calls himself. 3 out of 5 back on the offensive line. Caleb Warren at the center spot, Jeremy James right guard, and Micah Pettis at the right tackle spot. Patty C, do you expect this offense to put up? You think they take? You just mentioned there was regression. Do you think they take another step down?
No, I think with Dart at the helm for year 3, that offense is going to hum as long as he stays healthy. Losing Judkins is big for sure, but I'm assuming they'll have someone to plug that. So yeah, I expect the offense to keep going, and the schedule I do think is a little easier potentially. So I think they'll move the ball. The question is it going to be a gimmicky offense that stalls out in big games, which it has been. I mean, when put up 10 points against Bama, I don't know what they did against Georgia, but they got steamrolled. I
think it was 17. It's 52-17. I mean, that's a good point, and I think Kiffin will own up to it. The fact that on the line of scrimmage, offensively and defensively, Georgia specifically, but Alabama also, I mean, they just beat up this Ole Miss squad. So I think he realized that he needs to get tougher. He needs to get more stout on both the offensive line and the defensive line.
Well, I also think you're in this day and age where anyone can come up. I think it's a better era in a way, as much as I will say, I think the sport of football was better 20 years ago, but I think it's a better era to, rise up and anyone can kind of enter this realm. We saw TCU in the national championship 2 years ago. And I feel like this is their chance. 12-team playoff. They're going all in. We'll talk about that in a second, but portal, they lost some guys. That Bailey to Grambling, Quinshon Judkins to Ohio State. That's a huge one. And from what I understand is that this is a situation where he was frustrated with they're going out and paying all these players and not taking care of business at home when he was, arguably the best running back in the nation, in my opinion.
Think about Ohio State's backfield now.
Yeah.
Travion Henderson, he's still there, right?
Yeah, they have Henderson and Judkins.
Holy crap. They're winning the national championship.
Yeah, Judkins' sophomore year in general was kind of interesting. I think I was one that called for him to maybe run for 2,000 yards last year. And actually, he ran for 400 yards fewer than he did in his freshman season and also averaged 1.6 4 yards less per carry. So he had more success as a freshman for some reason. I mean, maybe it was the injuries to the offensive line last year. I don't know, but he had a better freshman year than sophomore year. But I think we all agree that he's a beast if given the opportunity.
Yeah, I went to the Texas A&M game there at Kyle Field 2 years ago, and he just jumped off screen, and you're just like, who the fuck that? Him and Evan Stewart, who's now the receiver at Oregon, both that game, you're just like, they're better than everybody on the field.
Well, Zach Evans may have been something that kind of, I guess, took attention and eyeballs. I mean, they were probably rarely on the field at the same time, but at least maybe they could strategically give Judkins breaks. I don't know what led to his slight regression there in production, but I agree. He seemed to be completely dominant 2 years ago. Last year he was still very good, but they could just lean on him for long stretches 2 years ago.
Yeah.
Well, also running back Jam Griffin heads out. He's the starter at Oregon State, in Corvallis there. Also, Kedrick Rescano heads out to Arizona. And then Zachary Franklin, who I know me and NC Nick in DFS, when he was at UTSA, he loaded up. He hit the portal, hasn't landed anywhere yet. There's talk that he could be back at UTSA. They also
had those injury problems last year. Only played 3 games.
Yeah. Wide receiver Omarion Walker goes to Michigan. That's a nice get for Michigan. Larry Simmons, another wideout to Southern Miss. Jeremiah Dillon heads out to Vandy at the wide receiver spot. Braylon Brown to Marshall. JJ Henry to Abilene Christian. Wide receiver Rafe Vincent to the Sanford Bulldogs. And then they lost tight ends. Kyron Heath to Southern Miss. Michael Trigg, who was a big time recruit. That was he goes to Baylor. He was previously at USC. I think he was a 5-star, if memory serves me correct. So that is one to keep an eye on. If he can ever put it together, I feel like he has.
He was also injured last year. I think he only played 2 games.
Yeah. Javante Connor. He realized Oxford, Mississippi. He's got no style, quite like the great people in Greenville, North Carolina. He heads out to ECU. I'm sorry. It's not.
Plug it in.
It's not a. It's an Ole Miss podcast.
It seemed extra loud today.
Good. Offensive tackle Cedric Nicely to Marshall. Offensive tackle Cedric Melton to Houston. Kicker Caden Costa to Memphis. No relation to Frank. I mean, look. As much as I know the Portal King kills it in the portal every year, I think it is like you lose Quinshon Judkins, who was probably your best player in your team, arguably. Jam Griffin, who I think is depth. Zachary Franklin is a guy. Omarion Walker is a guy that I think they would be playing. Also, Michael Trigg is one that could potentially, had he been healthy. They lost some nice players on the offensive side of the ball. Would you agree with that?
I think it's mostly depth, other than Judkins, obviously. I think the rest of those guys were buried pretty far down on that depth chart. Will it affect depth? Potentially, but they're also bringing in a shit ton of guys.
Yeah, and Hunter in the chat says just blew his car speakers out with that ECU song.
Yeah, Trigg, Heath, and Connor combined for 9 catches last year. So the tight end, maybe just the tight end production on this team is going to be low in general. I don't know how often they're.
A few years ago, they had the tight end that was one of the best in the nation. I thought, right?
Yeah, but Trigg was injured, so like Trigg could still be we might be watching Baylor football this year and say, who the hell is that? That guy's good, you know.
Is it
that's my point.
Allmark's quarterback. Who was the?
I was thinking of Kenny Yaboa, who was. But we're going back to 2020. So anyway, sorry. Go ahead.
Well, look what they brought in. They were super aggressive. Typical portal king here. The running back position. They go out and get Henry Parrish from the Miami Hurricanes, Logan Diggs from LSU, and Dominic Thomas from Georgia State, as well as Rashad Amos, the starter at Miami, Ohio. What are they doing here? They still have Ulysses Bentley. I don't understand why all these running backs are going here, because there's 5 running backs now. It's just, to me, like Rashad Amos, I know he almost went to Colorado. But some of these guys, I'm just like, you're going to get like 6 carries. Like,
yeah, I mean,
they've been doing running back by committee for a little bit here.
But
that's a huge committee.
Yeah.
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 I mean, Amos ran for 1,000 yards and 13 touchdowns last year. Henry Parrish, well, he was also in the committee at Miami, but he led the U in rushing yards last year. Diggs led LSU in rushing yards last year, also part of a committee. But you're right. I'm surprised they signed all these guys because, there's only one football.
And they still have Ulysses S. Bentley. You know what I mean?
Well, there may only be one football, but there are lots of dollar bills to go around.
True.
That's a good point.
I
mean, do you guys think I would say the running attack definitely takes a hit without Judkins because they have a lot of pretty good players, but they don't have a Judkins.
True. Right. 100%. In the wideout room, I think the big one is Antoine Wells, former James Madison Duke wideout that was at South Carolina last year. He transfers in to Ole Miss. Jordan Smart also comes in from North Texas. Devin Price from FAU. Isaiah Hartrup from the Salukis of Southern Illinois getting in there. They also added tight end Daquan Wright from Virginia Tech, offensive lineman Jerquan Scott from Southern Miss, Diego Pounds, an offensive tackle from North Carolina who started at North Carolina, I believe. And then a couple Washington offensive linemen. Hey, their offensive line was great last year. Played in the national championship caliber team in Nate Kalepo and Julius Bulow. Maybe I'm pronouncing that incorrectly.
Close enough.
But I can tell you that's their big gets right there. Those Washington kids.
Yeah, they had a good line last year.
Washington. Yeah, they won the award. What is it? For the best offensive line.
And I believe they were starters too for that line.
That's what I'm saying. Those were huge gets, and this is what I mean when they're going all in. When they're going all in, it's I know you can sit there and say if they're going all in, how do they not pay Judkins? But to me, adding those pieces on the line of scrimmage, adding Antoine Wells from South Carolina, and getting those other running backs that are productive college football running backs, they're just not as good as and even Diego Pounds, like I said, like they went out and were super aggressive in the portal, and we'll talk more on the defensive side of the ball, landing a few guys, but the offense. Here's another thing though: is continuity. Do you think that hurts the portal king? Because I know he's winning 9-10 games, but maybe a little bit of their record is they struggle in big games against teams that maybe have more continuity than them.
I would think so. I think that seems to be standard knowledge that the longer you're with a team, the more chemistry you develop, the more kinks you work out. So yeah, in big games that might be a problem for them.
I mean, you could argue that the Alabama loss last year was in September, so it was in their first 4 games. But if you look at the schedule this year, which I know we're going to go in more doubt, they don't really play a tough game until you could argue week 5. So they're going to have plenty of opportunity to get all these moving pieces on the same page.
Still, when you're playing a team like Georgia, who doesn't heavily use the transfer portal and is probably pretty deep into their, defensive playbook, and they're sending heat at you and giving you, a lot of different looks, then it helps to have seen it all together,
sure,
several times.
Let's talk about the defensive side of the ball. They were 30. So, the offense, by the way, offense coordinator is Charlie Weiss Jr. NC Nick's a big fan of Charlie Weiss Sr. And
the decided schematic advantage, right?
That's right.
The defensive coordinator is Pete Golding, the former Alabama Crimson. The former Crimson Tide defensive coordinator, Pete Golding. They were 34th in scoring defense per game last year, 22.1 points per game. That was 7th best in the SEC. 68th in yards given up, 382.2 yards per game. 10th best in the SEC. 75th in passing at 229.5 yards per game given up. That was 7th best in the SEC. And then 71st in rush defense, 152.8 yards per game. That was 9th best in the SEC. Clearly, they're not the offense, but I mean, and this is something we should talk about too, is so the defense returns only 5 starters. Now, is that a good thing or a bad thing, NC Nick? What do you think?
I think the defense was probably below average last year. It wasn't like as bad as, say, LSU's. But I think if Ole Miss really does want to make the college football playoff, they're going to need some improvement there. So I think with the pieces they brought in, what you're about to show, they at least have the opportunity to be better than last year.
Yeah. And look, they returned 5 starters. 2 on the defensive line, a linebacker, and 2 defensive backs. Those defensive backs: John Saunders Jr., Trey Washington. The D line is Jared Ivey and J.J. Pegues. Linebacker Kari Coleman, also back as well. But they do bring back the kicker and the punter. Special teams matters. But in the portal, they lost a few guys: DeMarcus Smith to UAB, Joshua Harris to North Carolina, Reginald Hughes to Jacksonville State, Skylar Mann's in the portal. Defensive back Ladarius Tennyson to UCF. Defensive back Daniel Newman's in the portal. Hasheem Young, who was a very good player a couple of years ago, heads out to North Texas. Great get for the Mean Green. Defensive back DeMarco Williams to Western Kentucky. I don't know how big these hits were. Hasheem Young was on all Big 12 player a couple years ago.
Yeah, 66 tackles 2 years ago.
Yeah, at Iowa State. And
and Harris was part of like the defensive line rotation last year. He wasn't a starter, but he saw the field. Maybe some depth concern there.
I think Tennyson played some too, but I could be wrong. Maybe that was 2 years ago.
Yeah, no, he did. He had 26 tackles, 1.5 sacks at safety. So they got hit a little bit, but man, did they go out. And this is the big thing to me. What they did here is huge to me. So Chris Hardy comes in from Jacksonville State, who he played really well at Jacksonville State. Princely Umana Malayan. This is a guy who started at Florida. He comes in. And this is what I mean. Sacks last year, something like that.
This is what I mean by them going all in this year. They get him. They add Walter Nolan from Texas A&M, who was a 5-star recruit.
I just saw that both those guys are potential first-round draft picks.
Yes, that's what I'm saying. So they're going all in. And then Chris Paul Jr. was the best defensive player for Arkansas last year.
Led Arkansas in tackles.
Yes, they're going all in on that. Isaiah Hamilton played well at Houston last year. Trey Amos comes in from Alabama, familiar with Pete Golding's defenses. He was just there 2 years ago. Amorian Walker from Michigan. Oh, a national champion defensive back there coming in. And then Yam Banks from South Alabama.
Great name.
Key Lawrence played at Oklahoma. I know we did the Oklahoma preview the other day. We were talking about
I feel like he was a contributor.
Yeah. Brandon Turnage from Tennessee and Luis Moore from Indiana. This is them going all in, right?
The talent's there. Also we did the LSU podcast a couple days ago or a week ago, and we said that last year they went heavy on the portal on defense, brought in a lot of big names, and it didn't really materialize. So obviously you like to see this, and I think it gives the defense a much higher ceiling than last year, but you still got to put it all together.
Yeah.
What's that? Florida State did go all in, and it did materialize for them. So mixed results with the transfer.
You got to have the right coach, and the players that got a big bag of cash from Ole Miss, they have to produce and not get lazy with all that cash.
Yeah.
Let's talk about that win total. It is at 9.5. But look, before I get your comments on that, I want to tell you folks out there that the college football experience is brought to you by Underdog Fantasy. Pick 8 is now live for the NBA Finals. Create entries with up to 8 picks, and Underdog will automatically double flex entries so you can miss up to 2 picks and still win your entry with more picks to make and extra ways to win. The excitement is higher than ever. The best part is you can win up to 325 times the amount of money you originally enter. You can win now using their specials and boost on they've added. So they're all flexed entries essentially. Don't miss your chance to try it out before it's gone. Sign up, and when you do, sign up with the promo code TCESGPN to claim your special pick plus first time deposit offer up to $250 in bonus cash. And they do have college football action. UnderdogFantasy.com, promo code TCESGPN. Over under 9.5 wins, and if you look at the juice to this thing, it is slightly in favor of essentially them going 10-2. The over is -115, the under is -105. So They're leaning. Vegas is leaning to the Rebels being 10-2 in 2004. NC Nick, I know we're going to go game by game on the schedule, but your first reaction to that?
Well, Ole Miss went 10-2 last year. I would argue the schedule is probably easier than last year, and they have a lot of pieces coming back. So I think it's probably right where it should be.
Yeah, Patty C, what do you think? 9.5 wins, right where it should be?
Well, this team has won 10 games in consecutive seasons only once in its history. And that was 1959 and 1960, which I think is their only claim to a national championship. So are they going to replicate it? Is it going to be a 65-year drought that's been I guess exercise? I don't think so. I think the SEC is still very hard, and it's hard to do it 2 years in a row with the target on your back. So I don't know at first, but I do think it's close. I think it's possible they get to 10. 11 or 12 seems very hard.
To win the SEC championship, they're sitting at plus 600. Remember, they're going all in. Why not sprinkle if you're a Rebel fan? 12-team playoff. Yes, to make the 12-team playoff, minus 130. No, plus 100. So Vegas is saying this is a team that's going to be in the 12-team playoff. Bold. To win the national championship, plus 1,500. I mean, would you guys take any of that other action? Maybe the SEC champ plus 600. Is that something?
I don't know if that's juicy enough. I think they're on the same level as some schools like Missouri, A&M, LSU, and I don't think plus 600 is juicy enough to win the SEC. And they haven't proven they can beat the best of the best in the conference. So I think my favorite bet on the surface, and we'll go into it more when we look at the game by game, but it might just be an over on that win total.
Yeah, Robert Martin in the chat. Shout out to Robert. He says, get the fuck out of here with this plus 1,500 to win the national championship. No way.
Well, I would agree with that, but I'm going to say this. A lot of people think that the 12-team playoff is going to lead to, no Cinderellas, squeaking their way through because they're going to have to grind too many games. We've talked about it before. An upset happens and your path gets easier. Ole Miss is the type of team that if they don't have to do it every week, they're good enough to, get through that slate and find themselves deep in the playoff. I don't think they're going to win the national championship. No. And I think that's a bad bet, but it's a different situation now. I think in a 12-team playoff, maybe they find themselves, playing like a Washington. I think Ole Miss could hang with a Washington from last year in the semifinals if they get there,
Well, no, you make an interesting point. Let's say they don't win the SEC championship or don't even make the SEC championship, but they make the 12-team playoff like Vegas is projecting. Well, the bye weeks are to the conference winners of the 4 power conferences. So if Ole Miss, first off, the thought of hosting a playoff game in Oxford, Mississippi in December seems fucking incredible. All these games should be on campus. But that just seems incredible. But let's say they're taking on, I don't know. Let's say they're taking on Penn State or another Notre Dame. Let's say Notre Dame's got to go into Oxford, Mississippi, right? Then if they win that game, you can argue that their opponent in the first round might be harder than the second round. The second round game, they might get Kansas State or something. You know what I mean? Like
or Clemson, or something. Yeah.
And that would be at a neutral site. And then all of a sudden you're in the national championship if you win.
Well, that would put them in the semifinals, I think, if they won the quarterfinal. So what would that be? No, is the same? No, you're right. That would
be in the national championship. Yeah.
Wow.
It's like 3 rounds. Yeah.
Can we talk about the SEC in general this year? It is going to be fascinating, but how many teams do you think have a realistic chance at the college football playoff? Do we say 7? I mean, do we say, stop me if one of these teams isn't included? Alabama, Ole Miss, LSU, A&M, Georgia, Missouri, Tennessee. Those are the 7 I see.
I won't
throw
even
Kentucky in there.
Well, I wouldn't even rule out.
Auburn?
Yeah, I was about to say I wouldn't even rule out like Auburn or Oklahoma or Kentucky. They all have potential.
I'm looking at last year's standings. Obviously, I forget Texas. I haven't mentioned them.
Yeah.
And Oklahoma. So not all those teams are going to win 10 games. It's impossible.
That's why this is the most interesting college football season.
Exactly.
In my lifetime.
But I think what's going to be interesting is the middle of the SEC. Are they going to be chippy enough to beat some of these teams, or is it really going to be really good and really bad in the conference? So I'm talking about you, Florida Gators. I'm talking about you, Arkansas, Kentucky, South Carolina.
Hey, Arkansas is 2-2 against Kiffin. All right.
Well, I mean,
out.
Yeah. I mean, it's easy to look at Ole Miss's schedule and say, oh yeah, they'll go 10-2, but that would mean beating some pretty decent teams or some like tricky road games like at South Carolina or at Arkansas or at Florida.
That's true. And we're going to get to it. We're going to go game by game on the schedule. But before we do that, I want to tell you the college football experience is brought to you by Rhythm. If you're betting on NBA player props, then you need to download Rhythm. That's RITHMM. Rhythm gives you a menu of the best player props for every single NBA playoff game, making it easy to go through and find the best props to put your money on in a matter of seconds. Rhythm's predictions are backed by over 3 years of data and a team of data scientists and quants that focus on fine-tuning their algorithm to give you the best shot at winning. From superstars to bench players, Rhythm finds the best player prop lines for you, all backed by AI data without you needing to endlessly scroll through some sports book. So claim your free 7-day trial period today. sportsgamblingpodcast.com/rhythm. That's sportsgamblingpodcast.com/rhythm. We're also brought to you by Game Time. Game Time is now an authorized ticket marketplace of the MLB, Major League Baseball, which makes getting tickets even faster and easier. And prices on the Game Time app actually go down the closer it gets to the first pitch. So you got to check it out. With killer last second deals, all in prices, views from your seat, and the lowest price guaranteed, Game Time takes the guesswork out of buying MLB tickets. So take that guesswork out of buying those tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use that redeeming code CFBX for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Once again, create that account, redeeming code CFBX. Download the Game Time app today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. All right, let's go. I see the chat. Got some Ole Miss fans excited. You got some Hail State fans in there. Let's jump into it. Week 1, August 31st. Don't sleep on the Paladins of Furman. All right.
I'm sleeping, Patty.
Yeah.
And man, FCS playoff team a year ago. Yeah. But yeah, Ole Miss should be fine there at the Grove. Week 2, they get what's my guy's name from Vanderbilt? It's early in the morning. I haven't had my
Clark
coffee.
Lee.
No, not Clark Lee.
The old coach is now coaching Middle Tennessee State.
Oh,
Derek Mason. Derek Mason is now the head coach of Middle Tennessee State, catching him in game 2. That will be a blowout because I think that's just a good time to catch them.
Yeah, last year with Stockstill, Middle Tennessee State played Missouri really tough at Missouri early in the season. With a new coach, I don't see it happening.
I don't see. You always love to get a new coach in September too. Then week 3, they head to Winston-Salem, take on Hank Bachmeier, Dave Clawson, and the Wake Forest Demon Deeks. This is a big game for the ACC. NC Nick, you taking your boys in Carolina?
It'd be hard to take Wake here. Wake was not good a season ago. Ever since the transfer portal opened, a few years ago, it seems like they've been losing most of their talent. I don't know if Wake can hang with Ole Miss.
Patty C.
It's a game you expect Ole Miss to definitely win, even on the road. I mean, if Dave Clawson can get the Deacons back to anywhere near where they had been up to a couple of years ago, then this game could be interesting. But Ole Miss seems to be in a far better place right now. This game, though, could really impact the SEC if Ole Miss loses, because the perception of the conference will, take a big hit.
And then
also, what would take a big hit is Ole Miss's playoff hopes.
Yeah.
I don't think you can lose to Wake Forest and make an argument, especially because there's going to be some other losses coming.
Yeah.
See, and that's my argument. People say like, "Oh, before it was the whole regular season was a playoff." Well, what the hell is this Wake Forest game? You lose this game, it's the same magnitude to me. If anything, I think there's more of a magnitude. All these games where you just mentioned 7 teams. I did an exercise the other day on the show where like you get to like late October and there's like 30 teams that could make the playoff, and every game is fucking just so much more gigantic than it was before. Week 4, they are home to Georgia Southern. No, former USC coaching duel.
That's right.
Clay Helton against Lane Kiffin.
They were on staff at the same time, right?
I don't think so. I think Helton was with Sark.
Okay. Gotcha.
But maybe he was before that.
Helton, okay. Helton got hired after Sark because he was supposedly the grown up in the room. Obviously Sark didn't qualify at the time, but so I don't know. Yeah, I guess he wasn't there when Kiffin was there. Probably a different staff entirely. Yeah. Even though they all went back to or how many of them went back to the Pete Carroll days? Was it just Kiffin?
I don't believe Clay Helton was a Pete Carroll coach at all.
Yeah, I don't know
I could be wrong there, but I don't think so.
How deep their staff went.
But Georgia Southern has a history. You watched that Wisconsin game last year. Georgia Southern let Wisconsin off the hook, and it got ugly late, so the score is deceiving.
Year before that, I think they almost beat Nebraska.
They did. They did beat Nebraska. Yeah. They have a history of doing this. They beat Florida without throwing a pass in the swamp. They took Georgia to overtime. Watch out for this one, man. I actually think out of all their non-con games, this is the scariest because, and here's another thing. Clay Helton and Georgia Southern, they suck in late October and November. Early in the year, they seem to be pretty good. So Georgia Southern, I think, is the hardest non-con game here.
Yes, but let's get real. I mean, Ole Miss should be 4-0, moving into week 5 in conference play.
And then the Kentucky Wildcats come to town, and if you remember, Kiffin's 2-0 against Kentucky, and the last time they played, Will Levis was in scoring position to essentially win the game against Ole Miss, and there was a strip sack from behind, and Ole Miss prevailed. Heck of a game. I still favor Ole Miss here, but it wouldn't shock me if this was a game. I think Kentucky's defense is pretty good. We just previewed Kentucky, me and Patty C. I think the defense for Kentucky will be sound. Now it's on the road. Give me Ole Miss to win this one. So I got them at 5-0. Nick?
It's a huge game, but it's hard to go against Ole Miss at home. So I'm with you, 5-0.
Yeah. Rolling. I mean, what was it last year? No, 2 years ago, they started out 7-0 and then ended up losing 5 of their last 7. So the 5-0 start might be comforting, but I think they know better than to relax at this point.
Yeah.
This is one right here, man. So October 5th, they head to Columbia, South Carolina to take on the Gamecocks. Williams-Brice. It's the week before the LSU game, which the LSU game's turning into a rivalry. They're 2-2 against LSU. They stormed the field against LSU last year. Why do I feel like this is a trap game? Give me South Carolina to win this.
Ooh, I like it. I don't know if I'm going to agree with you. I had them losing the next week at LSU getting revenge. I'm going to go Ole Miss over South Carolina, though.
There's no way they win all 3 of those. Like, they should be favored against South Carolina, favored against Arkansas, favored against Florida. And I will say this, there's a chance Pittman's fired, but Petrino is probably, you could argue, is a better head coach than Pittman. And then there's a chance that there's a strong chance Napier's fired in the Florida game, but I just don't see them going 3-0 there. Give me
I mean, those last 2 road trips could become a lot easier than they are right now if the coaches are gone.
But I don't know. I actually think
break awesome.
I think Petrino, in a way, you might be able to. Petrino, when he got fired, he won 9 games the year he got fired. He got fired because of the sex scandal with the intern. You know what I mean?
He's a great coach.
That's what I'm saying. Like, I actually think Arkansas, you can make the argument that Arkansas could be better with Bobby Petrino as the head coach. I'm taking them to lose one of these though, and it's South Carolina. So give me the Gamecocks. Patty C, what are you doing here?
I'll have them beating South Carolina, but out of those 3, I think you're probably right. Those are 3 tough road environments. South Carolina, Arkansas, and Florida. Yeah, you're not getting all 3 of those, even if you are individually favored in all of them.
And then they head to Baton Rouge. They're not winning this one.
Right.
This is revenge. Yeah. So you know what though? The more I think about it, they probably get South Carolina and they lose the next one, I think. So reverse my order. It's easy to see a tide turn. Give me them beating South Carolina, but losing to LSU. So they would be sitting there then at what, 6-1, right? low key, this is a dangerous game for Ole Miss because Oklahoma, I think, is going to be able to score like Ole Miss. And if Venables, I kind of trust Venables more than Pete Golding for the defense to come up and make a big play or two. But
I say coming off a loss with the bye week, Ole Miss gets right and wins like 39-35 at home versus Oklahoma.
Give me Boomer Sooner.
I think
in Oxford.
Yeah, I'm going to take Oklahoma. I'm going to take Oklahoma to get this done. Someone's going to say, like, there's too many hard opponents here, man. There's too many. No.
For me, it's the next game because it's not only is it coming off the big Oklahoma win, but you also have the look ahead at home.
Georgia on deck. Yeah.
And the Arkansas Ole Miss series, home teams have won 5 straight. So I'm
this
taking
is the one
Arkansas to win at home against Ole Miss.
Yeah, look, I switched my South Carolina to Arkansas. I got them losing to Oklahoma and Arkansas.
Ooh.
I got them dropping 3 straight games: LSU, Oklahoma, Arkansas.
Patty C, what do you got going on in Fayetteville?
Well, really between Oklahoma and Arkansas, there's one loss there. So I think they're 1-1 in that stretch, and that puts them at 2 losses going into Georgia, and that puts them at 3 losses.
No, not for me. They beat Georgia. They beat Georgia. Look, Georgia never plays in Oxford. So I actually think the last time they played in Oxford, they lost. And look, Georgia, everyone wants to crown Georgia, and I understand it, but they're not in the SEC East anymore. And even with that, the college football game has there's more parity. You look at last season's Georgia Bulldog team. They had a 10-point win at home against South Carolina. They had a 7-point win at Auburn. They had a 9-point win to Missouri. They had a 8-point win against Georgia Tech. No. They're getting upset here. Ole Miss beats Georgia. They're not just going to fucking run through this brand new SEC with no SEC East. You add Georgia, or you add Texas and Oklahoma. No, they're getting bit twice. Ole Miss gets it done. Upset. Ooh. They did it against LSU last year. They could do it against Georgia.
All right, I like it, but I'm going to lean towards Georgia. So after that game, I think we all still have them with 3 losses, right?
I do have them with 3 losses. Yes.
As do Patty and I.
No, Patty only has 2, right?
No, I have them
3. Georgia's the 3rd.
Okay. Then they get a bye week and they're at Florida. And this
Georgia does have Florida in the outdoor cocktail party the week before that Ole Miss game. So maybe Ole Miss is a beneficiary of that.
Dude, when's the last time Georgia went on the road to take on an offense as high powered as Ole Miss's? Maybe Tennessee year 1 with Heupel.
It's a good question.
Yeah.
I'm just saying Florida's offense been ass for like 5-6 years, or Mullins since the COVID year, I would say.
Quit breathing into that microphone, Patty.
Sorry. Yeah, let me know. I would say, Ole Miss too has the ability to upset number 1 teams. I feel like they did it a couple times when Bama came to town or when they went to Bama. So, maybe they have that in them this year.
I could certainly see it happening. I just have to lean towards Georgia right now.
I just think everyone's ready to crown Georgia and Ohio State. And look, I understand it. Those 2 teams are the most talented teams from a roster standpoint, but you look back at last season and there's plenty of, questionable games that, like I said, 10-point win against a South Carolina team that was in Athens, that at Auburn. What the hell's going on over there? And at Auburn, that was a 6-7 team a year ago. They won by 7. You know what I mean? 9-point win at home against Missouri, at Georgia Tech by 8. So they didn't go on the road. Last year's road games were for Georgia. This is a pathetic fucking schedule. At Auburn, 6-7. At Vanderbilt, 2-10. At Tennessee, now that was impressive. They won 38-10. And then at Georgia Tech, where they won by 8. So, to me, they played with a little bit of fire last year in those road games. Ole Miss, 10-win team on the road. Hey, it's not going to go.
Let me help you build your case, too. What if Georgia's undefeated coming into this game? And what if Ole Miss already has...
burn down, yeah.
And what if Ole Miss already has 2 losses?
What if I have them having 3 losses: LSU, Oklahoma, and Arkansas, and this is the get right game. And by the way, they can win out and still be considered for the 12 team playoff.
My point was, if they have 2 losses coming into it, or maybe even 3, is that Ole Miss needs this game desperately because they know another loss would probably not make them, playoff worthy. Well, as Georgia, if they're undefeated coming into this game, they can lose a game, they'll still make it.
Yeah.
So it's not like it was in the past where Georgia knew they had to win every game or potentially miss the college football playoff when it was just 4. So I think that's going to be interesting with these top teams the last 2 or 3 games of the season, because it's in that case it's kind of meaningless unless they're going for a bye, but still.
You know what the other thing about that Georgia game is? Georgia has Tennessee the week after, so they have Florida the week before and Tennessee the week after.
Great spot to get them. So after Ole Miss takes on Georgia on November 9th, they get a bye week and then they head to the Swamp. I fully expect Billy Napier to be fired, but I still say this is what's going to make the season, I think, even better. And I once again, to anyone that argued that we've devalued the regular season, I disagree. I think this game becomes hilarious because imagine this: if they are a 2-loss team or a 3-loss team, they can't afford another loss, and especially to a 5-7, 4-8 Florida or Mississippi State team. So all of a sudden, these games become fucking hilarious. Before, when Ole Miss was playing, we love the Egg Bowl, but before you're sitting there saying, okay, it's like 8-4 against 6-6 or something.
It didn't really matter, right?
Yeah,
I mean, it always matters in that game, but it wasn't like a playoff berth on the line.
Well, that's what I'm saying. Mississippi State, it has potential to do the funniest thing of all fucking time, and it's their old. Who knows Lane Kiffin better than Jeff Lebby, who was employed by him for a while, and also Florida, and they'll probably be with an interim head coach, but they could say, you know what, we can fuck up their entire playoff chances. This is what's going to make each game in the regular season. It's like
especially rivalry week. It's gonna the chance
like
to play spoiler
to college football. You were essentially like giving steroids to college football. The playoff is going to be fantastic because of that. I have them. I'll take them to win out, but man, that Florida game's scary to me. I don't, you know what I mean? Like that Florida game, because I could just see them after the way they beat Georgia coming into the Swamp and just laying a dud. I could totally see that happening. But
I would say a lot of those road trips are scary. At South Carolina, at Arkansas, at Florida, obviously at LSU is, but the other ones are scary because you kind of expect Ole Miss to win. They could drop any of those.
Yeah, like I said, Arkansas plays them well in the Kiffin era. And they're 0-1 against Florida with Kiffin. So, I mean, I know that was Mullen that got him, but I'm on the under though. Pat, I'll take them to go 9-3. Patty C, what do you got them at?
I got them right there with you. I actually feel like 8-4 is slightly more has more potential than 10-2 even, but 9-3 seems about right.
Yeah, I think we're agreeing way too much. I had them at 9-3 also. I think that's why the 9.5 is right where it should be. Because look, last year they beat Arkansas, LSU, Auburn, A&M. So they beat the teams they were supposed to beat. If they can do that again this year, they're probably 10-2.
But you add in Oklahoma. That's a different. I don't know what to make of that game. That game's going to be high powered. Like Oklahoma still has the hosses to me to fuck up Ole Miss. You know what I mean?
I mean, could we compare their schedule last year to this year? At the top, obviously Georgia's number 1 on the schedule this year. They were on the schedule last year. So, I mean, you could say Bama, I guess, could be number 1, but I would say Georgia was the better team, even though they lost.
Last year's was harder because the non-con. Georgia Tech's better than Wake Forest, right? I guess.
I mean, last year they played at Alabama and at Georgia. That's pretty crazy to play both those teams on the road.
That's true. I mean, maybe it's a even favorable schedule compared to last year. I don't know.
I think a lot of it depends if Billy Napier's fired, or like the condition,
or Pittman also.
Yeah, a lot of it is hindering on those guys being employed or not, because then they kind of become potentially like a bye week in a way. Like it depends if Florida has if they completely quit, or if Florida shows up to play. But I'd say last year's was maybe a little bit harder. I know you're getting Oklahoma this year, but last year they didn't have to go at LSU. That's one of the hardest places to win, you know?
Yeah. I mean, yeah, definitely. That's a big difference playing that game in Oxford versus in Death Valley. I just think, like you said, the road spots, South Carolina, LSU, Arkansas, Florida, you're probably going to get caught in some of those games. And then even though you're hosting Georgia this year, they're still not as good as they are. Oklahoma's a really good team that you have to host. The 10-2 is possible, I suppose. But I feel like the 3 losses, especially with the target on their back, they're not going to be surprising anyone.
Yeah, I actually think that, but this is juiced a little bit to the over. So Vegas thinking 10-2, 93. I mean, this is going to be fascinating. It's going to be fascinating down the stretch. Like, as much as I, would prefer them to have the 12-team playoff with 5 conferences or 6 conferences, so you didn't have these mega conferences. But it's going to be super fascinating to watch each and every game, because all of a sudden these games that you just like, the Arkansas game's huge now. It's absolutely huge for this season for Ole Miss. So,
well, let me ask you this. Lane Kiffin, has he proven himself to be a good coach, a very good coach at this point, or is this still a prove it year for him?
I think he's a solid coach. I think he's decent, but I
think you got to say better than solid or decent. He's had 2 out of 3 of his full seasons in Oxford have been double-digit wins.
Yeah, but to me, like, if you want to take it to the next level, like to be considered elite, you have to beat some of those really good teams.
Well, I think there's a step in between elite and solid. I'd say he's good. You said solid, I think. I think he's a pretty damn good coach.
That's the official step.
Ole Miss, exactly. Ole Miss should be happy to have him. They have promise this year.
Let me ask you this.
Yeah, roof is the ceiling. Is that what Michael Jordan said?
Let me ask you this. Will he be coaching there next year at this time?
He doesn't like to stay in one spot too long.
He almost left for Auburn. Remember that? Yeah. It almost happened at Auburn. So
there for a good time, not for a long time. That's the Ole Miss way. So it's a great fit.
I would say, especially say he goes 9-3, and what if the fan base isn't quite happy with that?
He leaves.
They're not firing.
No, I'm not saying they would fire him, but I'm saying he would leave because he'd be like, "You ingrates,
Yeah.
So
he's been known to leave at the drop of a hat. So.
Well, and he's coached in Florida, a little bit. So not only Florida, if the Miami Hurricanes have a horrible season, watch out for that.
Already did some good things down in Miami before, or Boca Raton, as it were.
Yeah, the old folks' home.
Or wait, Boca Raton? No, that's is that Florida?
That's
you're right. You're right.
Yeah. I can't wait for this season. It's gonna be fascinating. Ole Miss going all in. I love it. Every team should do this. Let's go. I'm on the under, but I would love to see Ole Miss host a playoff game in Oxford. I'm all on board. Let's go. We're all on the under. But it's close. It's close, I would say. Is any of this lock potential for you?
No, I don't think so.
I don't think so for me either. I mean, nope. I feel a little stronger than a couple other podcasts we've done so far, but I don't think it's a lock. Folks, speaking of those other podcasts, go check them out. 134 team previews. Get out there, listen to the Alabama one, listen to the Arkansas one. We're going conference by conference. We're in the middle of the SEC now. We got the Mountain West next, followed by the Big Ten. We're going through all 134 teams. Subscribe to the College Football Experience wherever you get your podcast at. YouTube.com/The College Experience. Also, I highly recommend watching this. We have graphics and everything. And make sure you give Patty C a follow on Twitter at PattyC831. NC Nick is on Twitter at NC__NICK. I'm on Twitter at TheColbyD. The College Football Experience is on Twitter at TCE on SGPN. Let us know your thoughts. If you think we're full of shit or you think the Rebels are winning the national championship, get out there. Let us know. Check out all of our other podcasts too. The Stadium Heads podcast, myself at College Football Campus Tour, aka Michael Barker, talking the great college football stadiums, traditions, and history, and why college football is the greatest the greatest sport on the planet. So go check out that podcast. Also check out the FCS College Football Experience. Maybe you are a Paladin fan. You were coming here to find out about Ole Miss. Check out the FCS College Football Experiences. We're always talking shop there. And it's a college basketball experience as well. Chris Beard doing a great job there in Oxford. Year 2 coming. I'm excited. Check out all that stuff. Check out the Sports Gambling Podcast. Until next time, folks, this is the college football experience, hotty toddy style. You better start thinking about yours. And we are out of here.